The curse. The quaint hamlet of Millfield was filled with an electric fervor when the secondary school proclaimed that they were planning to showcase a play centered on the infamous Bloody Mary. It was a timeless tale suitable for the Halloween season, and the students were enthusiastic to bring it to life on stage. Initially, the rehearsals went off without a hitch, but before long, peculiar and ominous things began to occur. Pups disappeared without a trace. Doors violently slammed shut on their own volition, and certain performers reported sensing a frigid presence in the theater. It seemed as though the ghost of Mary herself was haunting them. Despite the unsettling occurrences, the cast and crew chose to disregard them, assuming they were the products of their own imagination or the mischief of a prankster within their ranks. However, when one of the actors was discovered dead on stage, the dreadful reality of the situation dawned on them like a sledgehammer. The police launched an investigation into the tragedy, but after an extensive search, they failed to find any evidence of wrongdoing. It was considered an accident, and the show went on. As the performances continued, more and more accidents transpired. Lights tumbled from the ceiling, a stage prop catastrophically collapsed on a performer, and an inferno erupted backstage. The curse of Mary appeared to be growing increasingly potent with each passing day. The township was plunged into a state of hysteria, and the parents of the students insisted that the play be cancelled. However, the school board refused, asserting that they couldn't concede to the curse's malevolent influence. Determined to break the curse themselves, the remaining cast and crew delved into the lore surrounding Mary, discovering that the only way to break the curse was to chant her name 3 times in front of a mirror and then shatter the mirror. After hours, they convened in the theater and readied themselves for the ritual. Standing before the mirror, they hesitated for a fleeting moment, feeling the oppressive weight of the curse upon their shoulders. Yet, they knew they had no alternative. They chanted her name 3 times, and one of them pulverized the mirror with a hammer. A blood-curdling scream shook the theater, and the phantom of Mary materialized before them in a fit of rage. But rather than attacking them, she vanished as though the curse had been lifted. The students and faculty of the high school breathed a collective sigh of relief, and the township gradually returned to normalcy. However, the memory of the curse lingered, serving as a cautionary tale to anyone who dared to dabble in the supernatural. Despite the apparent success of breaking the curse, the students and faculty involved in the play were forever changed. They had witnessed inexplicable phenomena and had experienced terror beyond what they thought possible. Some of them insisted that they still saw Mary's reflection in the mirror, even after the curse had seemingly been lifted. Others claimed to hear her voice whispering to them in the darkness. As time passed, the incident evolved into a warning tale in Millfield, and the legend of Mary only grew more potent. Some even believed that the curse had never truly been lifted, that Mary's ghost still roamed the theater, haunting anyone who dared to summon her. Eventually, the high school ceased putting on plays about Bloody Mary, and the theater was left abandoned for years. Nevertheless, whispers and rumors persisted, with some claiming to hear the sounds of the cursed performance echoing through the empty halls. And so, the legend of Mary endured, a reminder that some things should never be taken lightly, and that at times, the price of dabbling in the supernatural could be deadly. The haunting of Mary. Emily was brimming with joy and exuberance when she stumbled upon her perfect home, a magnificent Victorian house that boasted a spacious garden, an ample room for herself and her husband Tom. Filled with eagerness, they moved in and eagerly anticipated the start of their new life together. However, it wasn't long before strange occurrences began to unfold. One fateful night, Emily heard someone whispering her name. She figured it was Tom, but when she turned around, she found herself alone, shrouded in darkness. On another occasion, she glimpsed a mysterious figure standing in the shadows of her bedroom, its features obscured by the gloom. But the worst was yet to come. While cleaning an antique mirror in the hallway, Emily caught sight of a face staring back at her, the face of a woman contorted with a twisted expression. Her eyes glowed red, and her hair hung in strands around her face. Overcome with horror, Emily dropped the cloth and staggered backwards. Driven by an intense curiosity, Emily set out to learn more about the history of the house. She uncovered that a woman named Mary had resided there in the early 1900s. Mary was known for her beauty and charm, but her reputation was tainted by intense jealousy and seething rage. According to legend, Mary had died within the walls of the house, and her malevolent spirit had refused to depart. Determined to rid the house of Mary's ghost, Emily attempted to exorcise the haunting spirit. However, Mary's wrath only seemed to intensify with each passing moment. Emily was haunted by visions of Mary's life, reliving the horrors of her abusive husband, her fervent attempts to conceive a child, and her ultimate spiral into madness. One night, Emily awoke to find herself surrounded by flickering candles, their light casting a sickly glow on Mary's reflection, which was mirrored on every surface. It was then that Emily realized that Mary would never leave her alone, dooming her to an eternity of torment and despair. In the end, Emily succumbed to madness. Her husband Tom discovered her seated before the mirror, eyes glazed over as she whispered Mary's name repeatedly. After that, the house was left abandoned, acquiring a reputation as a cursed place. No one dared to inhabit it, and eventually it was demolished. Despite this, rumors of strange apparitions and unsettling noises persisted throughout the town, emanating from the spot where the house once stood. Children dared each other to play the Bloody Mary game, but no one possessed the courage to follow through. Years passed, and Emily's tragic fate faded from people's memories. However, Mary's legend persisted, passed down from one generation to the next. Then one day, a new family moved into town. John and his wife Sarah were ecstatic to find an affordable house that boasted a spacious backyard, perfect for their two young children. But once they moved in, strange occurrences began to unfold. At first, the disturbances were minor, misplaced objects, creaky floorboards, but as time went by, Sarah began to hear whispers in the middle of the night, a woman's voice barely audible but unmistakable. She then started having vivid nightmares featuring a woman with red eyes and a twisted smile, who whispered Sarah's name and promised to avenge the sins of her ancestors. John attempted to ease Sarah's fears, but he could not deny the oddities he had observed in the house. He decided to delve into the property's history and discovered Emily's gruesome end. It was then that they realized they had to take action. They made several attempts to exorcise Mary's ghost, but nothing seemed to work. In fact, Mary's fury only appeared to escalate with each failed attempt. The family started to feel trapped in their own home, and soon enough, they were barely sleeping at night. John decided to conduct some research on the property's history, and what he discovered left him feeling disturbed. He found out about Emily's tragic end and the legend of Mary, the vengeful spirit who haunted the property. John and Sarah tried to ignore the strange occurrences, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the house. They tried to leave, but the doors and windows wouldn't budge. They were trapped. One night, they heard a loud crash from upstairs, and John went to check on the children. When he turned around to head back downstairs, he saw Mary's reflection in the antique mirror at the end of the hallway. Her red eyes glared at him, and her twisted smile sent shivers down his spine. John knew then that they were in grave danger. They tried to leave the house, but Mary had trapped them inside. They were helpless as she appeared before them, her ghostly form looming over them with an unearthly presence. The days went by, and no one saw or heard from the family again. The house remained empty, and people started to avoid it altogether. Rumors of strange sightings and eerie noises spread throughout the town, and the legend of Mary persisted. Some say that Mary's ghost still lingers there, waiting for her next victim. The house remains a cursed place that no one dares to enter, and the legend of Mary is a warning to all who would dare to play her game. The mirror. Rachel had always been enamored with her grandmother's house, a place of old-fashioned allure and one-of-a-kind character. Her delight only grew when, upon her grandmother's passing, Rachel inherited the antique mirror that had been passed down through their family for generations. The mirror was a work of art, adorned with intricate carvings and a palpable sense of history that radiated from it. However, strange happenings began to occur shortly after the mirror arrived at Rachel's apartment. Each time she gazed into it, Rachel saw something new, with some reflections appearing as twisted, distorted versions of herself. The sinister expressions and malevolent allure that emanated from the mirror, alarming to say the least. Initially, Rachel dismissed it as her imagination running wild, but as time passed, her fixation on the mirror grew. She became obsessed with unlocking its hidden secrets, spending countless hours staring into its reflective surface. The more Rachel delved into her obsession, the more intense her visions became. They were no longer mere distortions of herself, but twisted versions of her own face and otherworldly beings lurking in the shadows. It was as if the mirror had a dark power that was consuming her, a curse that had taken hold. Rachel attempted to distance herself from the mirror, but found it impossible. The mirror had a hold over her, drawing her in with its hypnotic power. As Rachel stared deeper into the mirror, she realized with mounting horror that Mary's curse had taken over. The curse consumed Rachel, driving her further and further from the world around her. Her obsession with the mirror grew until she was entirely lost to it. In the end, her body was found in front of the mirror, her face contorted in a grotesque expression of terror. And in the mirror, the last thing she saw was Mary, grinning wickedly back at her. The news of Rachel's death was a shock to her friends and family, who struggled to comprehend how someone so full of life could meet such a tragic end. As they searched for answers, the antique mirror came under intense scrutiny, with many believing it to be cursed. Reports emerged of others who had seen strange visions in the mirror, as if it were haunted by malevolent spirits. Despite the search for answers, no one could fully explain what had happened to Rachel. It was as though the mirror had consumed her, a victim of its dark power. Years passed, and the mirror is all but forgotten. Relegated to a dusty corner of an antique shop, occasionally someone would stumble upon it, drawn to its beauty and intrigue, and inevitably they too would find themselves staring into the mirror, unable to tear themselves away from its hypnotic gaze. For Rachel, Mary's curse had been her end, but for others it was only the beginning. The mirror remained, waiting to claim its next victim. As long as it remained, a curse of Mary would continue to lurk beneath the surface of reality, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. The possession. Amy, just like any other teenager, was a curious and adventurous individual who yearned for excitement. When her friends suggested playing the Bloody Mary game, Amy was ecstatic at the chance to experience something new and thrilling. She didn't think much of it and believed it was just another silly game. However, after that night, Amy's behavior began to change drastically. Her moodiness and withdrawal were apparent, and her parents noticed a sudden shift in her personality. She started to lash out at them, and they began to wish that something more sinister was at play. Initially, they thought it was typical teenage rebellion, but as time went on, they realized that the situation was far worse than they imagined. They turned to doctors and therapists for help, but unfortunately their attempts were in vain, as Amy's behavior became increasingly violent and unpredictable. Her family began to fear for their safety. They had no clue what was happening to her, but they knew they had to break whatever curse was causing it. After some research, they discovered that the curse of Mary was no mere game, but an actual entity that could possess individuals who summoned it. They concluded that Amy had become possessed by the vengeful spirit of Mary, and they needed to find a way to break the curse before it was too late. They decided to seek help from a local priest, who agreed to perform an exorcism on Amy, despite the danger involved. As the exorcism began, Mary fought back with all her might, causing Amy's body to twist and turn in agony, releasing an ear-piercing scream that echoed throughout the house. However, the priest remained resolute, and with the assistance of Amy's family, he broke the curse and banished the spirit of Mary from their lives. As the exorcism came to a close, Amy's body went limp, and she fell into a deep slumber. Upon awakening, she had no recollection of what had happened to her and was bewildered as to why her family was crying tears of relief. The nightmare was over, but the curse had left a permanent mark on the family. The memory of the supernatural experience lingered, and they couldn't shake the feeling of dread that haunted them. They knew that there were other curses and entities out there, waiting to prey on unsuspecting victims, and that they were vulnerable. Amy struggled to reintegrate into her normal life. Plagued by the memories of her possession, she was tormented by nightmares, and every time she looked in the mirror, she couldn't help but wonder if Mary was still present, watching and waiting to strike again. The family attempted to move on, but they realized that the curse of Mary had left its mark on them. They knew that they would never be the same, and that the only way to survive was to confront the terror head-on. For them, the possession of Amy was a reminder that the world was a dark and perilous place, and they had to remain vigilant at obey. The sacrifice. The adolescents had heard the legends of Bloody Mary, but their disbelief was unwavering. They perceived the superstition as a trivial game to be played in the darkness with companions. Yet after chanting her name 3 times before a mirror, a chill crept down their spines. Initially, they attributed the apparition to their imaginations. Nonetheless, Mary materialized before them, her eyes ablaze with an otherworldly intensity. She made an ultimatum, and the adolescents realized they were in peril. As panic consumed them, they endeavored to flee, but the structure was ancient and decayed, with passageways that twisted and turned in inconceivable ways. They promptly realized that they were entrapped and that Mary was closing in on them. One by one, the teenagers were abducted, pulled away by intangible hands to their ultimate doom. However, Mary's craving was not satiated with only one sacrifice. She demanded more, her hunger insatiable. As the survivors clustered together, they understood that they had to find a way to satisfy Mary, otherwise they too would befall a horrific demise. They scoured the edifice for anything that might plague her, but their attempts were fruitless. Eventually, they comprehended that the sole way to terminate Mary was to present themselves as a sacrifice. One of them would have to remain, be claimed by Mary in exchange for the other's safety. Regrettably, the unlucky winner acknowledged their fate with resignation, realizing that they were saving their friends from an inevitable death. As Mary claimed her final sacrifice, the survivors fled the edifice, never looking back. They knew that they would never forget the terror they had experienced, and that Mary's curse would pursue them for eternity. In the following weeks, the survivors tried to ignore the events of that night. However, Mary's chilling presence persisted, hunting them at every turn. They could not shake the feeling that they were under surveillance, even when alone. As time passed, the survivors began to experience inexplicable phenomena. Objects moved independently, doors shut abruptly, and cold spots manifested without warning. They were aware that Mary's curse had trailed them home, and that they were still in jeopardy. Desperate for solutions, they sought out a local psychic, who verified their fears. Mary's curse had indeed attached itself to them, and there was no way to exorcise it. The only means to avoid her wrath was to appease her with offerings and sacrifices. The survivors tried everything they could think of to satisfy Mary, but it was never enough. She demanded more and more, her hunger insatiable. They realized that they were trapped in an interminable cycle of sacrifice, and that they could never truly be emancipated. In the end, they accepted their destiny. They knew that they would always be tormented by Mary's curse, and that they could never truly escape her grasp. They became her willing servants, offering her sacrifices in exchange for their safety. As they lived out their lives in constant fear, always watching their backs, and always making sacrifices, they realized their grievous error. They had belittled the power of Mary's curse and now paid the price for their arrogance. In the end, they comprehended that there was no escaping the curse of Bloody Mary. It was a force beyond their understanding, beyond their control. And they knew that they would always be at her mercy, forever plagued by the vengeful spirit that they had aroused her.